Right now, we go to Cincinnati and find out more about this 3-7-1 Bengals team that had high expectations. Geoff Hobson, Bengals.com. I would assume this 3-7-1 team hosting Philadelphia is a little bit of a disappointment, Jeff.
Yeah, I think they've underachieved in places where they've usually achieved and where they expected to achieve this year, most notably on the offensive line and probably in the front four, probably where they thought they might get a little more pressure. These are kind of two similar teams right now. Both of them desperately need a win to stay in this thing, and I don't think any of them. I don't think either club has a lot of outside weapons on offense, and I think on defense they both have talented defensive lines that are trying to find consistency. So probably a pretty good matchup that way.
Yeah, you talk about outside weapons. You guys have one of the best when he's healthy. Is that an indication that A.J. Green will not play definitively on Sunday?
Won't play. He's out, and I don't know how much longer he's going to be out. We talked to him today for the first time since he strained his hammy November 20th against Buffalo. And, he says he's ready to come back, no matter the record. When he's healthy, he'll play. But I have a hard time seeing that. I'm sure they're going to want to protect him. I mean, unless they're still in this thing, obviously. But, he's a gamer. He's a great guy. He sets the tone. He's one of the leaders, and he's saying all the right things. But I would think that he'll not only miss this game, but maybe the rest of the way.
Yeah, and he's obviously a big-time target for Andy Dalton. Who's left? Without A.J. Green, no Bernard. Who are some of the guys this week, this much maligned Philadelphia secondary will have to deal with?
Well, they'd like to get Tyler Eifert going. I mean, he's coming back. He's had his own. Eifert and Green have only played together in 3 games because Eifert was banged up the first 6 games of the year. So they feel like he's coming around now. He had a very nice second half down in Baltimore. He's one of the best. He's one of the best receiving tight ends in the league. So obviously, whatever the Eagles had in mind for, Green, I would imagine they would do that to Eifert. They're pretty unproven on the outside. They've got a rookie slot receiver in Tyler Boyd, who's going to be a very good player in this league, but he's a rookie. And they've got James Wright, who's a guy who hasn't played much, a third-year guy. And they have the veteran, the Patriot, who won a ring with the Patriots, Brandon LaFell, who's a solid player, but he's not a guy that's going to light you up. You know what I mean? He's not a great threat, good solid player. But as far as breaking games open on the outside, it's A.J. Green.
Jeff, going one way, the Bengals are going to face another first-year head coach in Doug Peterson, Adam Gase for the Dolphins, and Ben McAdoo, the Giants, the other two. But on the opposite side, in your camp, Marvin Lewis, a longtime voice of the Bengals. And Mike and I talked about, is it like Andy Reid's situation where he's been around so long that maybe it's time to make a change and get a new guy in there?
I don't know. I mean, it's you hear that. Whenever they have a bad year, they you hear that. But then in this division, you just got to look around. John Harbaugh has been there through some tough times just recently. Mike Tomlin doesn't have very many tough times, but there have been some seasons they haven't made it. And Marvin but those all 3 franchises have won, and one of the reasons is because they've been consistent. Now what's the difference between consistency and being stale? I don't know. You tell me. I think probably you have to take a hard look at this season at the end of the year. Marvin's going to have to take a good hard look and see what happened, because in the years past that he's had bad years, there's been reasons why. There's been injuries or there's been, people lacking. But this year he pretty much had the same people intact that have been in the playoffs the last 5 years. The big thing was he had a change in coaches. He had 4 different position coaches on defense, and he lost Hugh Jackson on offense. So, big losses. So they have to go back and they have to look at it. But, everybody likes to take a shot at Marvin now. But when you win, you praise the consistency. When you lose, you stale. I don't know. I think in this league, they came into this year, 3rd best record in the AFC in the last 5 years. That's pretty good. So, is the guy suddenly bad after a year? I don't think so. I think he hangs in there. I think Mike Brown hangs with him probably for another year.
Geoff Hobson with us as we talk Eagles and Bengals. And give us an area of concern this week, Geoff, against the Eagles. If the Bengals are struggling off offense, what is something that concerns Cincy the most?
Well, I tell you what, a guy I really like is Malcolm Jenkins over there. He's just a fine player, a great guy, and he's really a good player back there. And Andy can't. Andy's just got to stay away from the turnovers, and he's done a pretty good job of that. But I think that Jenkins back there picking a ball off, and I think that the pass rush. I mean, Bowen's a proven pass rusher in this league. Fletcher Cox is tremendous, and the Bengals have had trouble, inside. So I think that's those two things. The lurking turnover, of which Andy's been good about not doing, but of which the Eagles can turn it over on you a little bit. And, they got to be careful. They had 3 sacks and strips in Baltimore last week, and they've struggled at tackle. And so that's something they got to be aware of. The Eagles have some good pass rushers, and, I think that's the thing coming out of Baltimore. You get the image of Andy, with a shot to tie the game, and Dumerville was stripping the ball from him. So, that's got to be a concern right now with guys like Cox and Bowen running around.
Yeah, and as you look at this Eagles team, they haven't pressured the quarterback. Jim Schwartz talked about it a lot, Geoff, this week, that we got to get back to sacking the quarterback. They had a bunch of them early in the year. They have not much. So is this offensive line a spot where it would be a concern if you're Cincinnati that this line could get Dalton pressured a lot?
Well, absolutely. I mean, Jimmy Schwartz is no dummy. He watches tape. So, I'm sure he's telling his people, hey, look where they rank in sacks per pass. This is a chance for our rush to get healthy. And the Bengals are coming back and saying, look, we got to make a stand. They're trying to get Obwehi, their first year right tackle. They're trying to get him squared away. They got him in a rotation with Winston. They've got to find out if he can play. And this is one of these games where they have to find out. Forget that the season's gone. It probably is, but this offensive line has to answer questions for next year, and every game for Obwehi is huge, and for this organization, can he play? They've got another guy. They got the second-round pick from 15. Obwehi was the first-round pick in 15. Jake Fisher from Oregon is a second-round pick in 15. He's barely played. They got to find out about him. So they got plenty of things to get done here, even if they're out of this thing. They got to get this thing solved.
There you go. The view from the outside of Cincinnati, where the Eagles have never won. Marvin Lewis, 2-0-1. They had a tie. Were you present for that glorious tie, Geoff?
That was. There were 2 Syracuse graduates that were confused that day. I didn't know how Shane Graham could miss it, and I guess he missed the field goal, and I guess Donovan McNabb didn't know that I guess he was going to go to a 6th OT. He's going to go to a 6th period. So there were 2 confused Orangemen out there.
There you go. The tie, that was Ryan Fitzpatrick leading that Bengals team back then. Were you also were you around, Geoff, for the famous Bobby Hoying game when they put him on the map for a time there?
Saw that when Boomer Esiason came back to the sideline after the go-ahead touchdown and said to no one in particular, not enough, and he was right. And then, of course, the greatest game, and then of course the greatest Eagles-Bengals game ever. The name Doug Pelfrey still makes Philadelphia sports writers weep because they were staring at overtime in the 1994 finale on Christmas Eve. You can imagine the Philly writers, they had a plane to catch for Christmas, and it looked like it was going into OT. Doug Pelfrey just kicked the field goal to tie it. Well, the Eagles fumbled a squib kick. Pelfrey kicked a 54-yarder at the gun, and everybody was able to make their flights. Only time in history, they believe it's the only time in history that a team scored twice in the last 3 seconds to win the game.
That's great.
Absolute craziness.
You mentioned Doug Pelfrey. You mentioned Pelfrey to guys like Paul Domowitch and guys like that. They'll start crying. He saved their Christmas.
1994. Geoff, before we let you go, Mike and I were talking about different foods, so we want you to compare, because you've been to Baltimore, I'm sure. Little Italy or Isabella's Pizza in Baltimore versus Skyline Chili.
Oh, I know. I mean, there's nothing like a cheesesteak in Philly.
That's right.
Well, I mean, I think being an East Coast guy, that's the one that carries the day. But Skyline's pretty good though. It grows on you. Not exactly not exactly a Weight Watchers diet there. You'll put on weight while other people watch if you eat Skyline.
Well, we had Sal Palantonio on earlier, and we were asking him where he was at this week. He said, he was in Baltimore, that he was missing out on the Skyline. So that's where the Baltimore Fair kind of got thrown into the conversation there. So I've never been to Cincinnati for this Skyline chili, but we've heard a lot about it, and I'm sure the scribes, when they come back, will tell us a lot more about it. But good stuff from Geoff Hobson, Bengals.com. The Eagles have never won in Cincinnati. They'll try to end that streak on Sunday. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, guys, very much. Hope to talk to you again.